For the plates then, the spacers and the plates, we need to pick a naming convention since it's pretty much going 30 by 30 up through 120 by 120, I believe, on the 4x4. As I pick the name, get a control of my mouse here. Pretty much we're going by 1x1 through 4x4, and I think they leave out like a 3x3 or something, if I remember from the last time we did this, that go through the mix. So I'm starting this with configurations. If you want to build each of the 9 or 10 items individually, I'm going to recommend that you review the peg, do the save as and open, and add on to and keep building into the mix rather than starting over each time. Starting over each time is painful, to say the least. The configurations can also be painful, but this is more of a focus, kind of building up into the complexity. This video will be more about managing the configurations and taking it up through the design table in systematic steps. So when I name this file, since it's spacer for the first 3 and plate for the rest, I'm going to call this file the spacer plate, and then we'll have single part numbers. We'll manage the part numbers later. I think that's going to be a little much to go through on the first run, so we'll come back and we'll kind of fill in some of these blanks later on. Alright, so flying this out, my first piece of geometry is going to be that single. So I want to find those common elements and develop from that point on. And we can do that with the same strategies. I can do the configure feature. I can manage the geometry in the base before I go over to the design table and really get my system and my strategy set up, rather than jumping right into to the design table. So the other side is, if you do not have Excel, then we're going to configure just pretty much within SOLIDWORKS. If you have Excel installed on your system, then you'll have access to the design tables. All right, so we'll stay with the front. Most of these are going to come in the top position, but we'll play with the rotation when we get to the assembly. But my design intent says I really should be putting this on the top plane rather than the front plane. Alright, so the start is to build up, and we'll set a height and a width. So 30, maybe not 320, how about 30? And I do, because I have the lengths varying, I do not want to set those equal or set some other relation. I need to be able to control each of those individually. So if we call it height and width, or length and width, I think height and width makes a little more sense. I'm going to come over and set the primary value to the width at sketch 1. And then we'll go with the height. That will help identify these so that I don't get them reversed, or have too much of an issue when we go to set. So in this case, I do not want to include the hole in the mix. We're going to drive that geometry as we build up. So our plate is our spacer is 10 millimeters thick. And we'll go ahead and accept, and then I'm going to open up the first, and I can't use relations here because as I build out and I change this geometry, the relations are going to float with the new geometry. So this is a 10 millimeter hole, and it's 15 off of the side and 15 up. Alright, so I've established my first common element and also my first configuration. Alright, so this can be the default, but I always kind of reserve the default for experimentation, that if I want to make changes, if I want to, in effect, I think something's going to screw this up, I want to do it in the default rather than in one of my established configurations. Alright, so we can give that a through all. And then picking up the naming, if you want to give it the part number for the configuration, the ME311-1, that's fine. Whatever you pick, just stay consistent. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the PhotoWorks display state out of my mix. And then also I'm just going to say that in the properties, I do not want to link whatever I put into the display state. It's only going to be one display state for all configurations. Alright, so we have the default setup. I'm going to go ahead and add the configuration for the single. So if I call this this was the spacer, and they didn't put it like like we did on the peg, and I don't think I picked, I just picked the naming, so there wasn't really a short, a long, or medium. I think lengths in that case were a little more descriptive. Single might help, in the description. We could go 30 millimeter by 30 millimeter, something along those lines. Alright, so that picks up my single spacer. If I don't want to include geometry, and let's go ahead and save. If I don't want to include geometry, then now would be the time to start thinking about that logic and building it in. So, all right. Now we go to the next level of complexity. All right. So my next will be the spacer double. So always going up to the very top to add configurations, and spacer double, and then this one will be, what are we doing, height and width, or length and width, length and height, or I already got my names backwards. So this one is 30 millimeter by 60 millimeter. And then we're going to stay with the configuration name. Alright, so the first method, I could go right into that configure feature, but probably don't want to get that carried away to start. Let's build some of this logic into the mix before we start moving up in complexity. Alright, so same thing when I double click on the width. I want to make sure that I'm just adding or changing, modifying this configuration. So width goes to 60, and we rebuild. And then I have the initial element, which is a 1 by 1, which is not a pattern. Will not allow it to go into the mix. But if I go to highlight the cut extrude, which is the hole, then I can set up a linear pattern. Alright, so the linear pattern for direction 1 says that I'm going to have an edge, if it'll pick it, instead of the edges. And I want to keep one of the lower edges because this is going to change. I don't know if that's going to have an effect on it, but I would suspect. And so we have a 30 millimeter spacing, and there are now 2 instances. The features that we are modifying will be the cut extrude 1, and don't see any problems with any of the rest of the geometry, so that establishes our grouping. Alright, so the 1 by 3 is not that big of a deal. If I go back to the pattern and we find that little 2 and I highlight it, then in effect this will be the width at L pattern, and we can accept. So now I have that started, and then we can go into our boss extrude, and I want to configure the feature, and it's still giving me that. I really got to get that one set up. So I'm just going to do the spacer triple, and we'll save the plates at the for the next level. Alright, so the spacer triple, and the dimension that I want is going to be to double click. Let's see, we get those, and I'm going to drive the width. So when I double click out here in the work area for the width, then the triple goes up to 90. So we're adding 30 each time. And then apply, and OK. And then in this case, since I'm still in the spacer double, so we need to switch over to the spacer triple. And then I need to activate the pattern and find the 2 element and make it 3. Alright, and it is just for this configuration. And we hit OK and rebuild, and then it's going to add it. And I want to make sure to save since I have my initial logic. Okay, so I'm going to drag that one up. I'll do a little rearranging here. Then the double check is single, and it barks at me because L pattern technically does not have a 1x1, and so it's saying it can't complete that mix. So this is one of the instances I really didn't expect it to, but because I kept it as my starting point, I in effect carried it over. So I don't want to hide it, I want to suppress it. And what I would also consider is that if I go to the default, is suppressing it so that my commonality says that there is a 30 by 30, and also suppress the whole so that at its very base the default is the block. And then the logic builds up that with the spacer, and since I'm doing a lot of this, if I grab the dot, I should be able to see these as they go through. Right, so not an issue there. And then the triple is good. So each one is updating correctly, and we're getting good results. Alright, so if I come back up to the dot and double click, that will expand it out and go back into the mix. Now that we've kind of set the pattern, set the process, and created the first couple of instances, then I can switch over. We've got the triple. We're going to switch over to the chart and the W as needed. So pick up that pattern, and length is needed. And again, I'm not quite sure why they duplicated it on the plate base, other than not pretty much duplicated it. Alright, so the part numbers and the geometry we'll start to build into the rest of the system. Okay, so in this case I would want to consider one of the configurations that already had everything. At the triple level, there's not a 3x3. there is 3x3. What are we missing then? 2x2, 2x3, 2x4, 3x3, 4x4. The 3x4 is the one that's missing. Alright, so if I wanted to set up a 2x3, then I can start with the triple, and that would be the next. If we wanted to go to a 2x2, that would be the double. The 1x1 really doesn't help us because of the suppression state, so I think the double would be a good place to jump off. Alright, so then adding the configuration from the top is going to take the properties of the spacer double, and then this is going to switch over to the plate. And we'll update the naming to the 2x2, and pick up the configuration name, and I'll probably just go ahead and copy that over just so it shows up in the mix, and we go ahead and accept it. Alright, so now that is my active configuration, And if we go back to the Boss Extrude, double clicking on the sketch, now I'm going to make sure that I am in this configuration, and we're going 60 by 60, and then the cut extrude doesn't change. The L pattern though, I don't have a Y direction or a vertical direction, so I have to edit the feature. And then we're going to see what this does. Alright, so 30 millimeters on this configuration, and 2 items on this configuration. Actually, that one's not changing. The depth or the spacing is the same for all of them. And then we need to expand out direction 2, and direction 2 will be the vertical. Alright, and 30 millimeters for all configurations. And then in this configuration, if I do all configurations, then everything from the single up to the triple and including the 2x2 are going to try to include this second. Alright, so we go ahead and hit the 2x2. You can see from the preview it's going the wrong way, so we'll reverse the direction. Hit OK, and then the quick check is we make sure to rebuild. Everything's up to date. We'll go through the single. No rebuild errors, the double, the triple, and then now we get into the plate at a 2x2. Alright, no major problems there. Alright, so the Boss Extrude then, going back into, well, let's do it at the sketch level, because I think I'm going to need that geometry. So when I go to configure the feature, we have the height and the width. I'm still getting that pesky warning. So I want to preserve at least whatever the last 3 or 4 for the design table. Take advantage of that. So we'll do a plate. We're going to go to a 2x3. And the width on the 2x3 then is going to be 90 and 90, or let's see, 60 and 90. So height, and the width is 90 for the 2x3. Then we can apply it, hit OK. Alright, so it gets added, 2x3. And when I double click on it, I'm not expecting to see the 3rd row because we haven't created a 3rd row. So if I were to configure the feature for the pattern, then now I'm looking at that group, and if we follow along, I should be able to change that one to a 3. So after that first instance where I didn't have anything, I don't really have to click on the dimensions. This is just going to be the instance count as far as the height. So that was one I should have changed when I put in the pattern. So we'll hit OK. That updates. I want to go back to the pattern, and we have a 2 and a 3. So if I get those out of the way, since I named height and width, I'm going to stay with those designations, and we'll save. Alright, so I could continue on just doing, kind of floating between the configure feature and the configure feature, and I would get to the same state. If I want to control more or start to build in even more complexity, this is where we switch over to the design table. Alright, so insert, and just off screen I went to tables and then design table, and I don't know how to get that one in there. So towards the bottom, about the 5th one from the bottom, it does a little flyout, and then the second item will be the design table. So if we tell it to auto create, it's going to go through and find all of those parameters that we built in so far, and then allow model edits to update the design table. So if I change something on this side, it populates over to and is associated to the design table. Otherwise, blocking it means you have to go into the design table to make the changes. So we go ahead and hit OK, and it should launch. And this is relatively processor intensive. I don't know about graphics, but we'll get it started. It goes through and it finds the current configurations. We have the string properties. So let's kind of expand that out, and then we'll go back over. So if I needed to add something, I would pick a description, and we would populate it by double-clicking, and it would add it to the header. And then it's a little difficult to read, so I can switch those over to an angle, but I'm not going to do that much with it. So let's just go ahead and, so the triple, that description I can overwrite with a 30 millimeter by 90 millimeter on the description, or we could go with the 1x2, 1x1. It just depends on more consistency. So if I change those will update. Alright, so the width and the height, the state, I'm going to see if I can drag. Nope, it's not letting me drag it, so let's cut it. And I will paste it. And then the other state, cut and paste. Alright, and then we'll just delete those two. Alright, so now I'm looking at the width. Actually would have liked for that one to go one more. So I would have the width and the instance. Alright, well, I'm going to make that way too complicated. So let's go ahead and copy. Alright, so we're going to have the 2x3, the 2x4, the 3x3. We said there wasn't really a 3x4 or a 4x3. Alright, 2x3 and 2x4 and then 3x3. And then if I want to stay, we'll go 4x3. I'm trying to keep the width as the base number. It doesn't really matter, but so let's go with the descriptions. Copy and paste. Alright, missed something there. Control C. There we go. Got the preview. Control V. Don't care about the colors, so we'll go ahead and pull that down. Part numbers are configuration. Alright, so we may want to come back and analyze that later. So 60 by 4 would be 120 on the 2x4. And I think it did, if we were doing height and width, yeah, then let's stay with the 3x4. So now's the time to make the corrections. Okay, 60 by 120, and then that would stay with 2 and 4, and we could put U's in there for unsuppressed. Alright, the 3x3 goes to 90 by 90 with a 3x3. And then we go to 90. Nope, I think I'm getting those reversed. The 4. Yeah, so that's where the width and the height. And we're doing, and I got it reversed over here to height and width. Alright. Okay, so let's see. The width is 120. So the square ones doesn't really matter, does it? So 90, and then the width will have 3 in that direction, 2 in that direction. Alright, that makes sense. And then the 120 would be 4 and 2, so I'm having to reverse. And then the 3x4 would be 120 by 90, and my 3. So that was what I was trying to avoid by realigning my my columns, was to clean those up. Alright, so the check is, we'll see how bad I screwed it up by clicking out, and it should tell me which that it successfully added each of the configurations. And then the check is that we go 2x3 and then 2x4 and it did not update, which means that I probably stayed with the 2x3. Alright, so the advantage, 2x4, changing the properties. I'm going to do this a couple times so I know it's going to change the corresponding cell in the design table. So we do want a 3, and we go ahead and hit OK. And then we'll check the next one. So it's important to go through and verify these after we've created them. So the 3x3, the 3x4, and the 4x4. Alright, so in the mix we have created the spacer plates, and that gives us a good jumping off point to start building the assemblies. So let me just reiterate one more time, is you do not have to create the configurations. You are going to encounter these, so you need to know what they are. Alright, on to the assembly.